As I was given the opportunity to speak here today, I have to admit, the prospect is fairly humbling. I have no illusions about my experience with the world comparative to everyone else's. I'm only 17 years old. I've only really seen a few places in the world. At the same time, in those 17 years, I've come to believe something very powerful, that every one of us have a story and a message worth spreading. And of course, everyone, well, includes myself. So this is just a piece of my story, something that I learned on an unforeseeable adventure that I went on in Burkina Faso. Now, I've had to spend a lot of time to find a thought, something that was worth spreading here today, something that could relate, something that could educate, something that I learned about myself. Now, this is a daunting task to begin with, but as I thought about it, as I went through my memories, my stories, with time it came. Oddly enough, it came with one very specific scene from Burkina Faso. I'd like to share that story with you now. Now, it was the day after Christmas, December 26th, I think it was 2009. Myself and my mother, and a fellow friend and a family from the MC, we decided to celebrate the late Christmas by going on a safari. Now, we'd already been in the country for about a year, and yet, oddly enough, we haven't seen any of the nature, so we decided to amend that. Now, the heat was intense. The sun was at its highest point in the day, and I remember thinking to myself with some confusion as I looked at the horizon, the very heat twisted what would normally be a flat surface into just a waving, profusely mess of images and colors. And I'm thinking to myself, it is Christmas, and I'm watching the horizon being twisted by heat waves. Even that in itself was intriguing, but the intrigue didn't end there. Oh no, far from. In fact, to my left were my fellow tourists sitting and standing in the dirt under the shade. I remember Melanie's two children. They'd found some sticks in the dirt and they were swinging them around. I remember they were blissfully unaware that our safari had just been suddenly and effectively stranded in the middle of the Burkina Bay prairie. And to my right was the still steaming slag of a truck that was responsible for the whole mess, and our very humble driver who's still, after hours, trying to tinker and fix the thing. And nowhere to be seen were the two spotters responsible for guiding and protecting us from the wildlife, as both of them had ventured out in search for a cellular signal. And this was a very uncomfortable situation because here I was, the involuntarily commissioned guard and lookout for our failed nature expedition. Now, I was armed with a rusted old 12-gauge shotgun, which I suspected for a moment may cause more harm to me than whatever I would have to fire at. But you know what? Even if I wasn't harmed, turns out nothing would really be harmed because they gave me 2 shells of birdshot, which, as we all know, is very effective as we were standing in the middle of a region known to be inhabited by very large mammals. And I've heard they are territorial at times. And we also saw a lion about 20 minutes before we broke down. Anyway, I'm beside myself. But as I surveyed the circumstances of this odd day, I couldn't help but wonder, well, here's where the thought began, predictability. Of course, everything worked out. 5 hours later, both spotters returned. The car did somehow get fixed. The man was a miracle worker. I've never seen anything like it. The thing was beyond salvation, but he did it anyway. And I was able to return. I retired my career as a one-man security detail and went back to being a vacationer. But then this thought came to me, predictability. Or rather, more importantly, the lack thereof in our lives. We make plans, we're smart, we're meticulous, we like to foresee things. We look to the weather, we look to the economists just to know what will happen tomorrow. But that doesn't happen. No matter how clear our reflections are on yesterday, no matter how good our perceptions are of today, we can never fully perceive tomorrow. This is kind of a baffling concept. We all know it, but it's troubling, it's daunting. So I decided to be very mechanical in thinking about this. So this is what we usually do when we make a plan. This could be anything, whether it's a movie on the weekend or our entire academic career. This is the basic structure of it. We have a starting point, and we think of the series of actions and steps we need to take to get to our end point. It's pretty straightforward. This is beautiful when it actually happens, but of course it never does, unfortunately. But we're not short-sighted. We're able to foresee variables and uncertainties, so what we do, we make other plans. We make backups. We make alternative routes, new goals. But despite all this, you can fill the alphabet with your plans, 26 plans, and yet this will still happen. Fate can come down and demolish our envisioned path and pave its own in moments. Now this, to me, I'll admit to you all, is a very daunting prospect to me. Matter of fact, I find it to be terrifying at times. In fact, no matter how good we are, how skilled, we can't be prepared for everything. Then I thought about this more. Well, despite not being able to prepare, how do we do it? We go day to day. We make plans. We watch them get destroyed, and we're not really stopped by it. We continue. We grow. We learn. We adapt. Adaptability. Well, there's something. As persistent as this challenge is, there is something that is even more persistent than that. And it's our ability to meet those challenges. It's our ability to adapt, our resilience to them. So I had to think to myself, why is that? How are we able to do this? We love plans. It's in our nature. We like to be able to be secure in what we do, but we're not. We never are. We never will be, really. Yet we continue anyway, and we become stronger for it. Now here's where it came to me. Well, I think we are prepared. Within all of us, there's things that we have yet to discover. I mean, we all realize that we can't discover the entirety of the world, but we also forget in this that if we can't experience everything, we also can't see how we react to all these experiences. So I believe that in each and every one of us, there's thoughts, there are ideas, there are feelings, skills, traits, abilities, outlooks that we have never used, utilized, or never known that were there until the circumstances around us call upon it. When we are pushed out of our comfort zone and forced to deal with new circumstances, it is then that we truly test our limits. And when our limits are tested, I believe they actually begin to expand. And this is where my idea of dormant potential comes from. An idea not unique to me, but everyone has, that within all of us, there's all these things, all accumulated into one idea that lays unknown, undormant, until we were forced to, use it, until it's called upon. As I thought about this more, memories just come rushing through my mind, quicker than I couldn't believe. 2 years and just hours just going through my mind. And I realized I experienced this personally, every day. I'd like to share just a short story of how I became, acquainted with Burkina Faso. It was a very jarring experience, I won't lie. Now, I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. My entire life was spent in the city. I had very close ties to it, It's like most of my family lived just on the street. I remember I used to know the number of concrete blocks that were between my house and my grandmother's, just down the block. I knew all the neighbors. I knew the name of their pets, even. So my world was very confined, but it was also very comfortable. I knew everything. But all that would change about 3 years ago when my mother was given a position in the State Department, a job that if she were to accept would lead us anywhere in the world. We literally cannot even guess where. Now, of course, this is a terrifying prospect for me at the time. I mean, this was my world. I knew it well. I knew the crevices, I knew the cracks, I knew the goods and the bads, and I knew it. I was comfortable. But I also had an urge for adventure. I've always been looking for this kind of opportunity, but always thought it was so far away. I thought to take on the world would be impossible for me. I mean, I was just a middle school kid from, from Portland, Oregon. Didn't know any other languages. Didn't really know all the countries at the time even. And yet, I wanted to do this. So I said yes. I want to go on this adventure with you, Mom. It's like, this is my venue to see the world. This is my opportunity to challenge myself and to attempt to take on the world in a sense. Now, of course, what I couldn't predict is that immediately the world would go on to take on me in ways that I really couldn't even imagine. Now, the first day in Burkina, we had spent 28 hours traveling, more than I've ever spent combined going across the country. And all we had to our names at the time were 2 suitcases and 2 cats, Fatty Bear and Shmoo. Now, their names were my mother's doing. I didn't name them. But for 28 hours, I was anticipating this new life, this new country, this new adventure. And for 28 hours, the cats showed their non-anticipation very loudly. I've never seen a cat meow louder than a jet engine, but apparently it's possible. And if you ever heard a cat lose its voice after 28 hours, it is a pitiful sight to behold. But after 28 hours, it is a very welcome one. Anyway, so we arrive. The plan was, we'd land, we'd have our guide, they'd take us home, rest. 20 hours is a long time, and then we'd take on the country the next day. But no, that didn't happen, no. Earlier in the week, there was severe flooding in some of the regions. One of our residents had been flooded, and the family that was living there had been moved into ours. So we were put in a hotel. Yeah, granted, the plans were wiped off the board. Didn't like that. That was the first experience, but we managed. It was a hotel. But what's worse is that the cats, they weren't allowed there. So we had to find something to do with them. Now, of course, as a cat person, I love my cats. I won't say it very openly, but I love them to death. But we didn't know what to do with them. So we asked around. We found residents who did have a hotel, had a good, garage that they could stay in. But the garage was hotter inside than on the outside. It was way outside on the other side of town. And of course, all these things just happening at once was almost too much to handle. I'm in a new country. I don't speak a word of the language. I don't know a soul in the country, and I have no contact to my family. Just me and my mother and this new foreign adventure that I couldn't foresee. But then I thought about something again. This kind of idea of challenge and ability to face them. I mean, I couldn't lie to myself. I couldn't say I've met this before. This is completely new. I've never seen anything like this. But at the same time, I realized this is what I asked for. This is the challenge that I signed on for. This is what I'm going to be capable of. So I took that initiative, I took that drive, and I did my best to learn from this. And it paid off. It took time. It was not easy. But after the first months, I began to know Burkina Faso well. I eventually grew to love it. By the end of the 2 years, to this day, I can say I'd be very willing to go back. And in that time, so many things have happened that I never pictured myself doing. I was able to teach deaf children how to read the eye charts. And oddly enough, I had a better chance with the deaf children than the French-speaking ones, but still, I managed to teach both. But just all these experiences, all these abilities, all these skills, initiatives that I never knew I had, they became unlocked through these challenges, through these experiences. Now, this is the idea that I want you all to kind of think about. Because this is, as much as I like to believe that my life-changing experience, all this growth that I've experienced over the last 2 years, is unique to me, it isn't. It isn't, and it shouldn't be. Because I believe in each and every one of us is a similar concept. We all have abilities and traits that have yet to be tested. Now, I believe that once you realize this, once you believe that you have this dormant potential, it is then that you can recognize your limits and know that they can go beyond than what you think they are. I mean, test yourself. Take chances. Do things you've never done before. Go places you haven't seen. And this is where you find new thoughts, new ideas, new abilities and skills that would have been left unknown. Had I not said yes to going to Burkina Faso, had I chosen to stay home in Oregon, sure, I would have been happier. I would have been more comfortable for a good several months. But I would not be as strong as I am today. I would not have the same understanding of the international world. I would not have the same perspective on poverty that I do now. I would not have the same resilience, and I also wouldn't have the same broken French. Be more broken, but still, I'm better for it. So this is the message I want you all to come from. Okay, now, my fellow physicists and chemists would probably appreciate a strong word. Recognize this. You know, your total ability is the combination of what you have what you use actively and what you don't, what is there but you don't know you have. Now, this is what I believe we should focus on. That we should test ourselves. We should take new chances and expand this, or rather decrease it in terms of the equation. But as when we do this, when we test ourselves, when we go beyond our bounds of comfort, when we exit it completely, it is here that we begin to discover our dormant potential. And once you do this, you realize that you are more capable than you could ever even perceive without testing yourself. That once you do this, it is then that you can begin to take on the world. So, thank you for your time.